This episode is sponsored by PAX, the gold standard in emergency response bags. So when you're working under pressure, you need kit to be both dependable, tough and intuitive, and that's exactly what you get with PAX. Every bag is handcrafted by expert tailors who understand the demands of post-op care, from the high-tech, skin-friendly and environmentally responsible materials to the cutting-edge welding process that reduces seams and makes cleaning easier. PAX absolutely puts performance first. They've partnered with 3M to make perfect reflective surfaces for better visibility, and bright grey interior makes finding kit effortless and fast even in low light. With over 200 designs, PAX bags are made to suit your role, your needs and your environment. And thanks to their modular system, many bags work seamlessly together no matter the setup. PAX doesn't chase trends, their designs stay consistent, so once you know one, you know them all. And if your bag ever takes a beating, their in-house repair team will bring it back to life. PAX are built to perform, made to last. Learn more at pax.bags.com or head to the show notes for further details.
You're listening to the Pre-Hospital Care podcast on the Medics Academy Network.
Welcome back to the podcast. Today, I'm here with Laura Hall and Kelly Wright talking about a different path and changing careers in healthcare. So for many clinicians, the traditional path of healthcare offers purpose and stability, but it can also sometimes feel restrictive, misaligned, and with the evolution of time, really incompatible with sometimes a life that values adventure, education, and time outside conventional systems. So changing direction within healthcare is rarely a single leap. More often, it's a series of deliberate steps that shaped by curiosity, burnout, growth, or just a desire for sustainability. So in this conversation, we're speaking with Laura Hall and Kelly Wright. They both bring their lived experience to that reality. So Laura is currently a pre and post-op nurse in a small town in Colorado. She's also a wilderness medicine instructor, a trail running coach, and has built a career around adaptability, education, and performance in demanding environments. Kelly is a flight nurse and endurance athlete who has really shaped her professional journey, reflecting both the physical toll and the profound privilege of high acuity care. So together, they're the voices behind High Adventure Healthcare, a platform dedicated to honest discussion, education, and redefining what healthcare careers look like in the contemporary environment. Kelly and Laura, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks so much for having us on, Owen.
Oh, it's a pleasure. It's a pleasure. I chuckled before I started just to say I was going to do a short introduction, and they never are short introductions. They're always longer preambles. But what fascinated me about both of your stories, and something I could identify with really, is really around pivoting into different roles within healthcare, beyond maybe traditional roles. And that's what I really wanted just to unpick with you both today. And I guess in a way, as a starter, and maybe Laura, I'd come to yourself first. Could I get you to speak to just a pivotal moment or experience that made you consider really shifting your clinical career? And it's something that blended medicine with adventure, education, and outdoor pursuits. So just that pivot, really.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Thanks for asking. I became a nurse because I was actually working in the outdoor industry when I decided to go to nursing school, and I was just kind of looking around at the women in my life who I admired, and I realized that they were all nurses. They were people who worked really hard and did very meaningful work, but then also were able to have this schedule that allowed them to go on all these super fun adventures. And so that's what I wanted for myself. And that's why I went to nursing school, very practical reason to have a job wherever I wanted, make a decent amount of money, and a schedule that allowed me to play. Um, I've been a nurse for 7 years now, and, talking about the pivot, I was just counting, and I think I've had 5 different nursing jobs in 7 years. Just constantly pivoting towards, what works for me in my life in the moment. I recently transitioned from working in a ski town ER to working in a surgical hospital as a pre-op and PACU nurse. And, working in a ski town ER was always my dream job. That was what I envisioned for myself when I went to nursing school. I had a schedule that was pretty similar to like flight nursing here in the United States, where I worked two 24-hour shifts a week. I was able to stack my shifts and go on all these great adventures and ski before and after work. And it was really fun until it wasn't. And so I recently pivoted once more to a more stable job that allows me to be home every night, have a regular sleep schedule, have just a little bit more control of yeah, of my life and my schedule and weekends and holidays off. And so it's just been really fun to kind of see this arc of my nursing career and my nursing skills being this constant, but being able to pivot based upon, what makes sense for my life in this season. So yeah, I'm just really grateful for the skills and just for always being able to pivot towards what makes sense.
Yeah, indeed. No, and that does make sense. Absolutely. Absolutely. And Kelly, to yourself, could you just maybe walk us through some of your fundamental pivots that you've made?
Oh my goodness, I've made so many. I've been in nursing for over 10 years. I'd say, the start of my big pivot was when I started as a flight nurse, almost 5 years ago. Obviously the schedule was appealing, as was just being able to get out of the four walls of a hospital and being able to go on scene calls and whatnot and serving rural communities. Um, and then I had to pivot and start travel nursing because I knew I had to get that out of my system before I, got too high up on the seniority list with my career. So I left and traveled for about 3.5 years. Another pivot led me to think I wanted to go to CRNA school. So I uh, pursued that. And then, the joy of healthcare and nursing is that you can find something that doesn't work for you. For me, that was being back in a trauma ICU and go back to doing what does work for you. So after 3.5 years away from home, I came back to my flight job, which I'm, absolutely loving. I get to fly around the Sierra Nevadas and then again, we may have another pivot on our hands in a couple of years. So I'm yeah, like Laura, I'm just grateful that there's when you have a season where you want things to change, you always have options to do so.
Yeah, and I think that's powerful actually because it is about keeping options open, but also learning new skills at the same time. So the pivot is available to you and falling back on those skills. And I guess my next question really, and Laura, I'll come back to yourself and then to Kelly, really is around, I guess in a way, that fear, because sometimes there is fear of the unknown and that pivot. And could I get you to speak to, when you are contemplating a career shift? In a way, how you work through those fears and Laura, just to your anecdotal experience, really, kind of and embracing the fear, embracing the change, embracing the fear, embracing the new skills. Yeah,
How you get through it is sending your best friends a lot of long voice memos.
Both sides.
Kelly can certainly attest to that. I think I spent, this most recent pivot, I think I spent probably a month just hemming and hawing over, is this the right? I mean, I literally made an Excel spreadsheet and calculated like, what the benefits package was and what the pay was and does this logically make sense? But then as part of like the feelings behind it, yeah, I sent dozens and dozens and dozens of voice memos and chatted in depth with my family about, does this make sense? Am I crazy? I worked really hard to get the job that I had. And I mean, it was something that, we bought property where we did because I thought that I would always work there. And so to then be like, am I going to leave this? Was definitely a really scary decision. Um, in the end, there's this quote, and I don't remember where I first heard it, but it's make the little decisions with your head and the big ones with your heart. And in the end, I just like kind of had this gut feeling of like, I have to pivot, I have to try. And I think also knowing that you can always go back. No decision is ever permanent. I'm pretty sure that if I did want my old job back, they would welcome me with open arms. So I think, yeah, it's scary to make those big changes, and it certainly does require a lot of thought and care to make them, but nothing is permanent. There's always another door to walk through.
Yeah, indeed. No, indeed. And Kelly, to your point, and if I'm right in thinking, you did go back to your flight job. So you left the flight job and went back to the flight job. And I guess in a way, to Laura's point, trying to leave the door open from your last role and or kind of pivot sometimes gives you that flexibility and to test the water. And you've said this earlier actually, Kelly, around testing and seeing what works for you, and if it doesn't, then maybe pivoting back into your role. Could I get you to sort because how was returning to being a flight nurse? Was it kind of a relief, or how was it?
Yes, I when I left before, it was on good terms. It was, I'm leaving because if I don't travel right now, I'm afraid I never will. And I love my job, I love my home, I loved my coworkers. Um, and so then, with my time in the ICU in Portland, and I was so unhappy, with Laura and the fear. It's like I tried something, it didn't work. I went over and over in my head and in our voice memos on what I should do. Should I go to school? Should I not go to school? Should I come home? And um yes, coming home was a huge relief, to go from night shift in the Pacific Northwest in a career that I really not a career, in a position I didn't really love, to coming back to my company with open arms, to a schedule that allows me to live life, was a huge weight off my shoulders. Orientation for sure was a little bit easier this time around. Um, but the job is still challenging me in new ways. But that, still means that it's exciting and fun, and I'm still learning. And it was, while it was a relief, it was a little scary because I felt like the expectations might be a little bit higher for me now that I've already done this job. I got more ICU experience. But I think that's good. Being challenged is healthy in your career.
Yeah, indeed. No, absolutely. And you speak to a really interesting point, and it's a nice segue actually around the competing interests of your life outside of work. So, your as you were saying before, your desire or appetite for travel, for adventure, for maybe even for trail running and wilderness travel and keeping in shape. Could I get you to speak to Kelly? I'll come to you first, and then maybe to Laura. Actually, just about everything outside of work, because you're right. You're the whole person. You're not. It's not just about your career. It's about your appetite to see the world, maybe to look at some travel nursing or travel medicine, and everything that job facilitates outside of work. And absolutely, that's almost equally as important as life inside of work. Could I get you to sort of speak to that?
Yes, this is what I think this is what Laura and I love to talk about the most, because we're just both so passionate about living. And this is really why high adventure healthcare was created, was to like celebrate what we all as healthcare workers can do outside of work. Um, I nursing was not my first choice of a career, but it was appealing because of the schedule. And so my entire career, I have been focused on, self-scheduling, giving myself big blocks of time off, making sure I can go on little trips. The flight nursing schedule obviously just was helped me enhance my time off. I've been able to, very easily train for a marathon and a 50K, simply because it's easier to do so when you have 5 days off. And even if you're on shift, it's that firefighter somewhat setup. So if we're not on a flight, we're just waiting and we are allowed to do some exercise. But I would say a huge priority of my life and my schedule and any job I choose is, what is my schedule? What kind of freedom do I have outside of it? How can I best like manipulate these factors so that I am living the life I want to live? Because just like we all say, we work to live, we don't live to work.
Yeah, and I love that pivot actually. I think that's a great pivot. And Laura, I think you're responsible and guilty for actually getting Kelly into ultra marathons. Could I get you to speak to that pivot and just exactly what Kelly said there about kind of working to live rather than living to work?
Yeah. No, absolutely. I do take credit for Kelly's downfall into trail running. Um, yeah, it's one of my greater accomplishments in life. Um, but yeah, I think, just to kind of riff off what Kelly said, and we work or we the whole point of becoming a nurse was to be able to live the life that we wanted to live. And um I was laughing when Kelly was talking about her 24-hour schedule and how she's able to work or to work out while she's at work. And when I was working at, my dream job, the ski town ER, I was also working 24-hour shifts, but unable to work out while I was at work. We had to be in-house working during the day, and then we were on call at night. And I remember it was 4th of July weekend last year. I worked July 3rd and July 5th. And I was up all night on the 3rd and all night on the 5th. And I completely missed out on July 4th with my family. And I think that was actually the weekend where I was like, I need a change. I need to do something that's supportive of the life that I want now. And for me, that was, something that has weekends and holidays off that allows me like a little bit more structure in my schedule, which certainly a lot of nurse schedules are a little bit all over the place. But the benefit of working in a surgical hospital is Monday through Friday, no weekends, no holidays. Um, and for me, I kind of just had this transition from where my old schedule and the 24-hour job shifts allowed me to kind of stack shifts and take these longer adventures. Now I'm at a place where my husband and I are building our home here in Southwest Colorado. My family, my mom, my dad, and my brother are an hour down the highway. And so I wanted to create a life that enabled me to have family dinners all the time and, watch football on Sunday with them and things like that. And so, yeah, that ability to just kind of switch your schedule and switch what you're doing to align with the goals that, you have now at this point in life.
So let's just talk about that and about in a way, for clinicians that do feel stuck in their current roles, and Laura, I'll come to you first, really. Could I get you to speak to maybe just unpack some practical steps that you'd recommend beginning to explore those adjacent careers without burning bridges or taking undue risk? Laura, I'll start with yourself and then come to Kelly, but just some practical steps because I don't think it really is uncommon for people to feel stuck sometimes.
Yeah, I think for me, one of the most important kind of exercises that I walked myself through when deciding to make that pivot was making a list of what do I enjoy about my current job, what do I not enjoy, and then trying to think about what type of role could I get that maintained the things that I enjoy about my current job while also solving for the things that I didn't. So for me, that was I enjoyed working with a small team. I enjoyed having some autonomy in the work that I do, and I enjoyed the critical care aspect. And so now working but what I didn't enjoy was the schedule, and kind of those sleepless nights and feeling like a zombie on my day off and not having weekends with my family. And so now working in the PACU, I still have that small team. I still have autonomy. Most of our patients are very healthy, but I do occasionally get that critical care side. But I also now have the schedule that I want. So just being very practical about making that list there and making sure that you're not just moving from one bad situation to another bad situation. And not that my situation was bad, but making sure that you're actually solving for the things that you want to solve for in that pivot. Also, I think the beauty of nursing is that you can always stay per diem if you're leaving a position, you can always stay on PRN and maintain that relationship, making sure that you're being really communicative with your managers about, hey, this is why I'm making this change. This is what I need for my life. And hopefully you're in a supportive environment where, they understand that and are willing to work with you and maybe keep you on per diem to kind of keep your foot in the door in case that pivot doesn't work and you want to pivot back.
Yeah, no, indeed, and give you that almost that portfolio flexibility of doing the ad hoc shift here and there to keep your hand in and stay familiar. Kelly, to yourself.
Yes, I agree with Laura. I think, being really honest and transparent about what you need and what you're looking for in your life with your manager or whoever's in charge of your position, is paramount. I think people, people obviously want their employees to stay on full time, but if you've ever been at the bedside, you also know that many times this career is not sustainable long term and it can really affect your personal life. So when I, left the first time to go travel, my boss was totally supportive. He very much understood why I had to go do it. And yeah, they welcomed me back. Um, and also I think for people looking to pivot, um, yes, like the pros and cons list, like Laura said, but also just getting creative. There's more positions out there than we think about outside of the hospital. I do think, at least where I am, the hospitals do pay the best. So maybe it could also just be getting creative with a part-time and a per diem or two per diems or different positions in multiple places so that you're making, the amount of money that you need to make a living, but also being able to create the schedule and lifestyle that you want.
Yeah, indeed. No, indeed. And almost like you're saying, having this portfolio career where you can dip in and out and to Laura's point, just shape your schedule and to your point actually, shape your schedule a bit more and give you the flexibility and the autonomy and almost the breathing space to be able to facilitate lifestyle choices like indeed like wilderness medicine, but also just getting out there and doing ultra marathons and otherwise. And Kelly, I'll come back to you really now with this next question, and that really is around, in a way, that that tension between the stability of a traditional clinical role, which, to your point, kind of initially when you step into these roles gives you that security and that predictability, but can actually end up making you feel shackled. You made a really interesting pivot into travel nursing and facilitating. One of the things that I really find interesting is doing or facilitating a role which enables you to travel and work as you go. So maybe travel nursing, which you can do in a lot of countries on an advisory role or a clinical role. Could I get you to speak to really, in a way, stepping outside of that stability? And redefining your professional path, and kind of maybe even combining your love for travel with the role, because there is roles out there. There's roles on cruise ships. There's roles as a travel nurse. There's roles on expedition medicine, albeit maybe doesn't pay as well. But could I get you to speak to the sort of combining those?
Yeah. Travel nursing was always something I had in mind when I became a nurse. In hindsight, I wish I had gone straight to travel nursing and had kind of maybe not gone to flight the first time around. I, would have gone more places, seen more things. All good experience nonetheless. But yes, travel nursing, I think when you're in the right stage of life is just the perfect blend of being able to hopefully go where you want, but then also having the freedom to take a month off after every contract. So my, kind of standard of operations while I was traveling was I would take the 13-week contract. I would take a month long break and come home. I would take a 13-week contract. I would take a month long break. If I extended somewhere, I would still take a break in between my extensions. And so that was just a really great way for me to live in the Pacific Northwest. And then I lived with Laura, and then I lived in Hood River, and I tried out Denver, and I got to see a lot of places. I got to do a lot of cool things. I think if I had been younger, I would have maybe tried looking into some of the international stuff, but that is a much bigger commitment that I'm not interested in now. But if I was in a different place, if circumstances were different, I would maybe consider it. However, with things I have going on now, I'm ready to be a little bit more stable. But looking into other kind of career paths where I can have my own kind of freedom.
Yeah, indeed. No, indeed. And Laura, to your, could I just come to you and ask you about because very much when I was starting out as in the early 2000s as a paramedic, that stability was great for me, but it became a bind actually after a while. And as like as you branch out, to Kelly's point, as you become more confident in yourself, and as you kind of realize there's a lot more to life, maybe, and to see, could I get you to speak to maybe stepping outside of that stability, and to your point, kind of shaping your own schedule?
Yeah, yeah. Interestingly, I feel like I have the most stable career and schedule that I've had in my time as nursing right now. Um, but in the past, when I first started nursing, I started actually part-time instead of full-time, and I have transitioned between part-time and per diem and full-time, and kind of just bounce back and forth. Again, as we were saying earlier, just that freedom of nursing to be able to create what you want for the season that you're in, and I think one of my most unique times of nursing was when I was working per diem at this little ski town ER, and I was teaching wilderness medicine courses. So I would teach wilderness first responder courses in the United States. Those are a week long. And so I'd go off to some remote part of Utah and teach for a week, and then I would come home and work a shift or two, and then I would go on a trip and come home and teach maybe a short 2-day wilderness first aid class, and just kind of bouncing around. And it was super fun. It was really fun. It didn't necessarily pay the bills as much as I wanted it to, but I certainly got to see a lot and experience a lot. And yeah, I think that that's, the beauty of healthcare is that there are so many options. And I think that so often people get stuck in this dogmatic, like, oh, I have to work at this place for 2 years and I have to put my time in. And I have never subscribed to that. I've always been like, I don't owe this hospital anything. They'll replace me tomorrow if I leave. And yeah, just really being able to craft what you need in the season. And I think that that's the beauty of, the hard work that we do, is that we get to choose what our heart is in that season.
Yeah, indeed. No, absolutely. And let's talk about that actually. I think that's a really nice pivot. Just the element of everything outside of work, but also, just teaching and doing wilderness running wilderness medicine courses. But also, mentoring other people through that process, enacting community outside of work. Kelly, I'll come to yourself and then back to Laura, just around wilderness medicine instruction and or other specialist roles, just outside of the traditional scope. And almost enlarging your network to facilitate future choices and indeed future opportunities. Laura's just spoken to teaching, and I that was a real pivot for me actually, interacting and learning that training and teaching was also within my wheelhouse, and it opened me up to maybe a lot more networks, more opportunities. Kelly, could I just get you to speak to sort of diversifying from that traditional kind of it has to be within the walls of a hospital or indeed flight nursing.
I definitely think, flight nursing is like the perfect mix of clinical care and adventure. So for anyone interested in getting out of the hospital, that's what I always like to preach. I never got into the wilderness medicine teaching like Laura has. However, I'm looking into being a clinical instructor at our university, maybe in the fall. My best friend is an instructor there, and she said they're always looking for teachers. And I've always thought that would be so fun, just to help those nursing students in their final year, maybe in their ER or ICU rotations. And then when I moved home, I really thought I wanted to get into SAR and search and rescue. However, with my schedule, it's proving to be a little bit more difficult. So I've actually been working to get my dog registered with first responder therapy dogs, so that we can go help the community and be involved in that way. And I'm kind of in a place where I'm networking for my future self. So I do think I will be going back to school to get an FNP degree to just once again be able to craft the career that I want. I don't want to work in a primary care office. I don't want to work in an urgent care. I want to be my own boss and create some sort of health service and clinic that I'm really passionate about. So in terms of, getting creative and networking, those are kind of my next steps.
And Laura, to yourself, before we move on, really, you've joined a search and rescue team, you've taught wilderness medicine courses, and that really has maybe in a way opened up the scope of your network and opportunities and also just allowed you to meet some really interesting people. Could I get you to speak to that?
Yeah, I grew up the running joke is that my parents took their wedding guests whitewater rafting as part of their wedding reception. So that's kind of the family and the childhood that I grew up in. I've always been super comfortable in the outdoors and um so I knew when I became a nurse that I wanted to figure out a way to blend medicine with the outdoors and so pretty shortly after I graduated nursing school, I went to a course to learn how to teach wilderness medicine classes to people in wilderness first aid and wilderness first responding. And that's been something I just kind of do intermittently. That's been really fun. And yeah, last year I joined my county search and rescue team, and that's just been an incredible way to give back to the community and yeah, I mean, to your point of meeting interesting people, it's it's quite the little ragtag team of people, and it's given me this um amazing crew of friends here locally, and we have a group of really badass women on the team, and we call ourselves the sorority. So instead of a, traditional university sorority, we're the badass sorority version. And so it's been really fun, just to have friends to go, run and hike and climb and ski with in that way. And yeah, just kind of open the doors to my SAR team is paying the way for Kelly and I to go to this wilderness medicine conference, or for me to go with Kelly, I should say. And then, a couple weeks ago, I had the opportunity to go to an avalanche rescue seminar, looking at avalanche rescue from a professional setting rather than kind of some of the more personal avalanche rescue courses that I've taken in the past, where you're just talking about skiing with your buddies. This was from a professional standpoint and a kind of mass casualty, mass burial. And that was really interesting. And yeah, just all these really fun opportunities that it's opened up. So super grateful.
Absolutely. No, absolutely. And I think it's fantastic just to explore all these adjacencies, which actually can be highly technical, but also super interesting and allow you to meet super interesting people. Kelly, you just mentioned something really interesting there, and I think it's something I'd like to press on and just explore with you, really is around some of the traditional scope of practice and training in paramedicine and nursing doesn't really allow for or explore in a way the business opportunities and everything around running your own business, everything around how you shape a career in business with combined with nursing or indeed with healthcare. And to your point around actually maybe going back to school, university to indeed to explore the business concepts around shaping and building maybe your own business within healthcare. And because that isn't a formative path which is necessarily taught initially, but it's absolutely one which you can forge to your point of your own volition. Could I get to maybe just unpack that? Because in a way, you're right. You have to be the master of your own destiny. And that might involve doing something equivocal to an MBA or indeed a master's in business administration or some kind of, to give you the tools to build, along with the network, to build your own company in within healthcare. But could I get to speak to it in a way, because one thing I like about what you were saying is you're not waiting for permission. You're actually creating your own destiny by orchestrating it. Could I get you to kind of maybe unpack that a little and develop it a little bit more?
Yes, I love that you're using the term unpack because I feel like I've been unpacking this for years with Laura, going back and forth on this. In addition to always wanting to travel, I've always had this idea in the back of my mind since, after being a nurse for quite a few years that I'm going to go to FNP school and create my own practice and be my own boss. And then, life took me to the Pacific Northwest and I learned about CRNAs and I've pivoted so many times that I'm right back to where I started. And I think the appeal truly is that, healthcare is for everything, whatever. It's a mess. It's a mess in this country. And at the end of the day, you are just an employee for your company. I definitely feel a lot more valued as a flight nurse just because we're not as easily replaceable. But at the end of the day, I have to earn my PTO. I have to request the time off. I'm not getting exactly the schedule I want because we work shift lines. And while I absolutely love the work I do and getting to work 2 days a week, I don't think this is something I can physically do forever. And so, actually, a few weeks ago, I was considering an MBA or an MHA, which is a master's in healthcare administration, thinking that I wanted to climb the ranks in like healthcare leadership. But the more that I sat and thought and unpacked all of that, the more I realized that that kind of career where I'm working Monday through Friday in an office, but also likely on call all of the time for your organization was not something that aligned with me whatsoever. So, full circle back to my original plan, nurse practitioner school. In Nevada, we have independent practice ability. So I can graduate school and just build my own practice. I don't have the business background or education. I know some things from prior like dribblings in business, but I have seen other people do it. Other people in Nevada and all over the country are massively successful with their own practices. And so I say, why not me? Work for myself instead of someone else.
Yeah, listen, absolutely. Laura, just coming to yourself, just something, if I could just really tap into your reflection on what you might say to an earlier Laura Hall, really, if you were pivoting earlier, or indeed, someone's going to nursing school or paramedicine or indeed medical school, actually, and you're worried that you might be locked into this for next 10, 15, 20 years. But actually, with the advantage of hindsight, the pivots that you've made, what would you say to an earlier version of yourself, just to maybe reassure yourself that there is pivots available to you?
Um, yeah, that's a really great question. Quite timely as I'm moving through my own series of pivots as Kelly is. I think one of the biggest things that I would say is don't get locked into the sunk cost fallacy. I think in healthcare we all spend a lot of time chasing one particular goal, and we get so locked into the time that we've spent chasing that goal that we forget that there are other doors that can be opened along the way. Um, so yeah, being willing to pivot um and be okay with changing the path. And I think also ignoring what everyone else says. There's, like we had mentioned earlier, that I think there's this idea in healthcare that, you have to put in your time and all of that. And I just don't think that that's true. I think that we are the only ones that have to live with the consequences of our choices. So doesn't matter what anyone says as long as you're okay with the decisions that you're making. And yeah, again, just that make the little decisions with your head and the big ones with your heart. And usually the career ones are the big ones.
Yeah, I really like that, actually. I really like that saying. I think that's fantastic. Kelly, to yourself, if you had any words of wisdom to your younger self, what would it be?
My younger self probably could have taken some time to really think things through. I've always just kind of made a decision and then poof, I'm moving to Portland for good and renting an apartment for a year. No, but that's kind of a joke. Aside from that, yeah, very much like Laura. Don't be afraid to leave your job before you're fully vested. You don't have to work night shift. The hospital isn't your only option. Um, and also, it's okay to get out of healthcare altogether. seen a lot of people do that. One of my favorite coworkers is currently going for his MBA. Um, it is okay to decide that this path is also not for you, or to decide that, you think you want to be the cool, like ER, ICU, critical care. It's also okay to say, like, actually, I really like the more quote unquote chill specialties. It's okay to change your mind. And yeah, same to Laura. Ignore what everyone else says except you, Esther.
Yeah, indeed. No, indeed. And I think that's quite releasing actually, for hopefully younger people going through those thoughts or indeed those mindsets. I'm just pivoting slightly, Laura, coming back to you, just really around something you mentioned earlier, because there is, uh, in a way, a fundamental pressure, especially when in the highly specialized roles for clinical competence, especially when it's the ICU or indeed maybe the pediatric ICU or otherwise, highly specialized roles which require a lot of really in-depth knowledge, and it's not even just the in-depth knowledge, it's the in a way the contemporary nature of that knowledge. So you're constantly having to refresh your knowledge. And I'm kind of in danger of answering the question, but you answered it earlier nicely by saying, the pivots are maybe having a portfolio career, so dipping in and out. But could I get you to speak to really for listeners' benefit, really, if you are pivoting out of a highly specialized, highly technical role, nursing, paramedicine, or otherwise, how you sort of keep that contemporary competence of that role, because I guess that is a fear for a lot of clinicians when they pivot out of the roles, that they're going to lose their edge, their competence, and indeed maybe that contemporary knowledge.
Yeah, it's a great question. And I certainly feel like I have recently kind of made that pivot, working in a small rural ER, in a ski town where I was oftentimes the only nurse on shift with just one MD. And, you really have to be on top of your game. The phone would ring at 2 a.m. and, oh, there's someone at the back door with chest pain. And I have, 5 minutes to wake up and pull my scrubs on and get upstairs and start triaging this patient. Segue, into now where I work in a PACU of a surgical hospital, and it is, very chill, by every sense of the imagination. We get 30 minutes of a heads up on when we're getting a patient and get a look through their chart and see everything about them and get all of our supplies ready. And but I think the biggest thing is just not falling into that complacency, making sure that you are still doing a thorough assessment. You are still, have your spidey senses up for things that might go wrong, because, even in those more chill roles and chill environments, things do happen. Um, Patients do code on the table in surgery, and they do, code in the lobby of the surgical hospital and things like that. And just, yeah, just not falling victim to complacency and making sure that, you are still taking those steps. And then also, outside of a clinical setting, there are still other ways to continue to hone your skills, and making sure, I still subscribe to the emergency nurses journal, and I read through that pretty regularly. And making sure that there's other ways that I apply my skills, teaching wilderness medicine courses, and staying up to date on my CEUs, that are more emergency medicine wise, via like virtual courses and stuff like that.
Something that Kelly, you've written about in detail, and I'd like to get your thoughts really on the podcast for this, is with flight nursing, or indeed with pre-hospital care, and certainly within an aeromedical service, just making that pivot, the flexibility of delivering care outside the hospital, just that adaptability, thinking outside the box, that interagency working, everything around just, putting your conventional nursing education to one side, and really looking at how to, extraction and the CASEVAC of a patient, just really, you've written in detail really about having to really broaden the valence of your experience, and just really be open to that adaptable nature within flight nursing. Could I get you to sort of speak to that pivot? Because it is very different to in hospital care.
Yeah, I Being a flight nurse is interesting because most of the time we're paired with a medic who has that pre-hospital, a lot of trauma experience. And in an ER, a lot of, we do have the capacity to do and be involved in a lot of cool things, but a lot of the time we are aligning and labbing and you're sending them upstairs or you're sending them home. I always like to say there's actually very few true emergencies in an ER. And many of the times in flight, we're also not transporting a lot of real emergencies. We're transporting a lot just because of location and time and the community's lack of, a ground ambulance. Um, but yeah, if you are a nurse going into flight nursing with no pre-hospital experience, you just have to be an adaptable person. You have to be willing to get dirty or be put in uncomfortable situations. Um, and also to that, you can study and memorize your protocols and go back to your foundational nursing knowledge, but I also think it's just reps. It just takes like being out there and doing an assessment in the backcountry or seeing something that doesn't completely fall within your protocol bounds. And some protocols are a bit more gray than they are black and white. And that's for a reason because patients don't present in a black and white manner. Like, this is chest pain. This is what it looks like every time. This is what you're going to see. Things vary in their presentation, and it is kind of just a matter of weaving in and out of your knowledge and what you've seen and what you've done before and what your protocols cover. um, and you also just have to be open to that. So another thing we like to say is that ICU nurses do really well on our like critical care ICU to ICU transfers. ER nurses also tend to do well, though, more on the scene calls. And it's just because we usually just have a more open mindset than like the type A, like clean lines, organized lines. The ER nurses are a bit more comfortable in the small cramped spaces where, supplies are being yard sailed all over the aircraft. Yeah, I'd say it's really just about adaptability and an open mind.
So as we come into land on the conversation, just really, I guess the last question, which unites us all really, is I guess the love of the outdoors and Laura, just coming to you really, and then to yourself, Kelly, just a really round, if clinicians are passionate about outdoor medicine, education, or lifestyle integrated work, could I get you to speak to really some advice you give, some top of mind advice you give them to sort of help make that balance and indeed get involved in more outdoors or wilderness medicine?
Hmm. Yeah. Well, first of all, you can read our blog, highadventurehealthcare.substack.com. Um, Kelly and I have this blog where we feature practitioners from all over the world and all levels, from EMTs to MDs, who have used their licenses and their careers to create really awesome, adventurous lives. And so I personally, and I think I can probably say the same for Kelly, have drawn a lot of inspiration just from the conversations that we've been able to have there. Um, Secondly, I would say is get yourself in the room, go to the conferences, go to the symposiums, meet people in person, network, chat with people. There's a really great one here in Southern Colorado, the Silverton Mountain Medicine Symposium that I go to every year. And then Kelly and I will be at the Wilderness Medical Society winter conference in Tahoe later this month. And yeah, just getting yourselves in those rooms, making those having those conversations, and also taking classes, taking certification classes, getting your avalanche training, swiftwater rescue, high angle ropes rescue, joining search and rescue if that's something that you have the capacity for. Yeah, just really, putting yourself out there, getting in those rooms, and yeah, also reading our blog.
Yeah, indeed. And we'll put that in the show notes actually for people because it's a fantastic blog. Just really, and from both of you, and it just really covers the breadth and depth of wilderness medicine. It's fantastic. Kelly, finally, just to yourself, if people are thinking of making that pivot and just integrating more of wilderness medicine into their lives, I know Laura's mentioned a few there, but could I just get your thoughts?
Yeah, I would definitely co-sign everything Laura said. Flight nursing, if you are a nurse doing travel jobs in rural facilities. I think you'd be really surprised at what you can be exposed to. As an NP or PA, there's the locums jobs that also go to rural facilities. There's, I think, it's a company called Wilderness Medical Providers, and they set you up with the locums. Um, in the Wilderness Medical Society's like group chat website, I found a few docs at my local ER who provide the medical care for races and events. So getting in that way. Um, I don't know that I'll ever be able to do like expedition medicine, but we just wrote about a physician who was a part of a research team in Alaska. So there's and a girl who's going to space and a girl who works on cruise ship. Like there's just no limits. It's really just about looking it up. I mean, if you think there might be a medical provider needed for something, there probably is, and you can go be that person.
Listen, that's fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. And we'll be hearing really more from both of you actually on the podcast because it's really nice and a real privilege to do a deep dive into some of your Substack blogs and bring them to life in audio formats and just really walk through them with you both. So I just want to say thank you for the past hour. It's a privilege just to really unpick both of your fundamental journeys really and reflections on your journeys. And we'll be hearing more from both of you soon on the podcast. So thank you both.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. We appreciate it.
You're listening to the Pre-Hospital Care podcast on the Medics Academy Network.